Welcome to the Grappling Grappling Rewind Podcast.
Welcome to this week on the Grappling Rewind Podcast. So this week's show, we're going to recap Fight to Win 164, headlined by Vagner Rocha, Yuri Simoes, Dante Leon versus Manuel Ribamar, Gianni Grippo versus Gabriel, Souza, and Pj Barch versus Oliver Taza. And we're going to preview Who's Number One, headlined by Craig Jones versus Ronaldo Jr., and the Fight to Win 165 all-women's card, headlined by Maria Miljacek and Elizabeth Clay. As always in the show, I'm your host, Maine, and with the co-host,
Zach.
How you doing, Zach?
Good.
We got a good week of previews coming up, and some fights happened this weekend as well, but I want to seem a little more excited about the previews.
Yeah, me too.
This week in news, let's see what I got. We have a bunch of different cards coming up. Not a whole lot in Jiu-Jitsu news because it's the Rona times, and there's not a whole lot of news, for better or for worse. Submission Underground has announced they are taking place in March. Third Coast Grappling also has an event in March. Quintet has announced an event in March. Super amped for that. Haven't seen Quintet in
a while.
In a minute. I think Quintet Ultra might have been the last one, and that was like... That was a while. That was like Strikeforce versus WEC versus Pride versus UFC, and they got some guys to fill in. It was like, yeah, you're in WEC. We'll call it good for that. And then we have announcement of Manuel Ribamar versus William Tackett taking place on March 13th for Fight to Win. That got announced today, and that is a dope ass matchup. Yep. So Zach, do you have any other news?
I got nothing
whatsoever.
Nothing.
All right. So let's move into. Really, that's it. We got
that's all the news we got.
Is there anything else? Really? I feel like our news segment is more than about 45 seconds.
Usually is, but it's been a light week, or I've been too busy to actually get any news.
It's been a pretty light week. Oh, there's also a tournament coming up.
That was just announced.
that we just looked at a second ago.
It's a pretty solid tournament coming up. In April 3rd, I think I saw.
I think it is April 3rd. Yep. It is EUG Promotions is putting on an event. It's an 8-guy featherweight tournament. We don't have the brackets. We're not going to have the brackets till the day of the weigh-ins because basically they're going to have a big, lotto ball pit, and the guys are going to pick out their slot, the day of the weigh-in. So it's like, there's no seeding, there's no bullshit. It's just you pick the guy you have to face day of, which is kind of like, cool. All right, that sucks for previewing it, but I'm gonna watch the weigh-ins. I'm gonna be excited about that.
That makes that interesting.
In that tournament, we have Jonathan Alves, we have Shane Jamil Taylor, we got Isaac Doderlin, we have Marcio Andre, and we have Gianni Grippo.
There it is.
And we have Mateus Gabriel and a couple other guys announced. Also, there's some other super fights.
Looks like it's going to be a good time.
Yeah, it's the first promotion. May get an interview with their event promoter here in a couple of weeks. Yeah. Still kind of working it out now, but it's super exciting. If you want to hear more about that particular event, on Jake Watson's podcast, the Open Guard Cast, he had them on a couple of weeks ago, I think, and you can find it. It's in the feed. Really good interview talking about the promotion, creating it, and it seems like a lot of fun. Super excited for another new promotion to come out and put on a banger lineup like that. So that was news.
There it is.
Let's do it. On to the preview of Fight to Win 164. This one headlined by Vagner Rocha versus Yuri Simoes. Where do you want to start with this one?
Let's start with Wagner.
Let's start with
Wagner. At the top.
So this match for the first about 5 minutes or so was mostly
Wagner doing Wagner stuff, slapping people in the face.
Kind of a little bit of hand fighting, but
yeah. I mean, it was the hand fighting in it was. I mean, hand fighting can only be so interesting. But as far as hand fighting goes, it was interesting hand fighting because Wagner is Wagner, and and Yuri's not someone to take punches either. So it was a lot. It was as close to a stand-up fight as you could possibly get. They were about to be throwing hands. So it was pretty interesting. But about 5 minutes of it.
It was a little longer than I would have liked on the feet. Yeah. Especially because I really wanted to see more of Wagner's top game because I assumed that Wagner was going to be on top just given in his recent matches we've seen him since going to 185. Yep. Do that, and then Yuri being the bigger guy was like, okay, Wagner's probably not going to elect to go to the bottom here because Wagner usually doesn't elect to go to the bottom in any match. So then we saw Yuri. It was just a pull from Yuri. It was like I
wouldn't even call it a pull. It was sort of like they looked at each other and said, "This has been happening long enough." And Yuri sat down, and Wagner kind of was nice about it. He kind of let him sit.
He kind of did.
And then gently moved into half guard. It was like the two of them looked at each other and said, okay, enough of this nonsense, and then went to the ground.
No one's going to take each other down because we're both really good black belts, and Like, we're ground fighters.
Yeah.
So most of this match was on the feet, and then once it went to the ground, there was something really interesting that you kind of pointed out that Yuri was doing.
It's a thing that I've been seeing more of lately at the professional level, but I've been doing for a long time, just kind of naturally fell into my game. But it's this sort of, it's close to a knee shield half guard, but instead of keeping your toes on the outside, you sort of put your toes on the inside hip.
Yeah, the knee that's shielded across the body, the shin's shielded across the body. Instead of essentially flaring your toes out next to their hip line,
you keep it on the inside. And so
duck
you're like,
the toes in.
Yep, duck them in, and then you use the sort of blade of your foot against their hip bone, and it gives you a lot of control, and it can be a pretty challenging position to deal with. It's very defensive, though.
Well, you talked about it more from like when you have a bigger player on top,
yeah,
kind of keep them
it's pretty
at bay.
defensive, and so like someone that plays like Wagner, I think it was actually a very nice strategic decision from Yuri, where that constant pressure is really hard to deal with. And if you're playing a normal knee shield or even just a regular half guard and you're getting smashed down, you're getting your legs pinched together, that can be really challenging to deal with. But this particular brand of half guard, it puts a lot of the force that they're putting against you into a nice compact triangle frame that your leg's making, and it makes it almost effortless to keep a person at bay with that top leg.
Yeah, because you can essentially put the knee up the middle,
You're using almost no muscle. Right?
And the person, like, you can't really, as the passer, you can't really effectively slide the knee to either side.
Yep.
Because you have to, like, get off balance to sort of do that. The other leg on the bottom that's hooked in or in some sort of half guard configuration is still in play.
Yep.
You're also, as the guy playing kind of, what'd you call it? The
Toes in half guard is what I've always called it. But
to me, it's like an entry to the butterfly guard. It's like, oh, better get butterfly guard back. That's what I
you
use
don't want it. Like, I think he actually slipped into butterfly here,
there's
but like
one or
the
two
butterfly is
times where he
less. The butterfly itself, I think, is less effective than just keeping the toes on the hip.
Yeah, because you have all the distance
this,
of that shin, and with the butterfly, you tend to kind of get low and flared out. Like, you can't.
Well, and also your top leg is in an extremely powerful position when your toes are in and your sort of foot is pressed against them. And if at any point you need to, you can just, I don't know, sidekick them into outer space with that leg, right? It's a very powerful position.
That was sort of the biggest difference in this position than like sort of, we saw Yuri slip in a butterfly guard because Wagner was able to push the toes down and get low. And then that is a much more traditional passing stance, and Wagner was much more comfortable. He got up, he got much closer, started to push Yuri's knees together and start to get around. And then you saw Yuri go back to this position. You can keep your leg up in this position, whereas a butterfly guard, unless you're actually elevating the person with your hook there, it's very, very difficult, especially with a single butterfly and butterfly guard half guard.
And it takes a lot of hip flexor strength, which is not the strongest part of your leg, right?
It's like one of the flexor, the shittiest part of your leg.
Yeah.
They're like the worst.
Whereas if you keep your toes out of that butterfly position and just kind of keep it's all quad and hamstring.
Which carries your fat ass around all day.
Yeah, right.
It's very, very effective.
It's a really strong position. But the problem with it is that it ends up being pretty defensive, especially in no-gi. And gi, I found that you can be a little bit more offensive because you have nice grips.
Yeah, you have a lot more grips to work with, and you can you can start off balancing them with the grip work on either the pants grips or the collar and sleeve grips.
Also that leg pressure, that sort of just side kick out becomes a lot more effective because you can keep their chest in with your
essentially
collar grip.
with what a spider guard does, but from a different configuration.
Yeah, exactly. That's a nice way to think about it. But in no-gi, I find that a lot of times the only options that I really have from there are creating space and going for leg locks, which is exactly what Yuri was doing, but
Wagner's hip to the leg. We talked about this when we rewatched it ahead of the match. I was like, man, he's going to have a really hard time because I can't remember. I know Wagner has been leg locked, but he's fought Craig twice.
Yep.
Hasn't been leg locked by Craig Jones. And if you're not going to get leg locked by Craig Jones, I think he fought John Thor Blank as well. Like,
he has.
Those are the two guys at 88 in my head that, like, if you're gonna get leg locked,
it's gonna be one of them.
It's gonna be one of those guys.
Yeah.
If you fight both those guys and beat those guys and not get leg locked, like Yuri, very, very good, 2-time ADCC champion, but like he would start to hit the heel, and he had very good entries into the legs, but Wagner would immediately go nah, and because he was standing, he would immediately push either the trapped leg of Yuri's leg triangle or the other leg down, turn his hips, lift his leg out and up, and either spin forward or around, and then end up in essentially like the start of a passing position with Yuri not having any knee control whatsoever, and we saw that two separate times.
I think that Yuri was going for the leg locks, knees or ankles, but I don't think that he ever got into a place where I said like, okay, this is a a valid attempt. This is something that I would actually label an attempt. I knew what he was going for, but Wagner never let him get to the stage where I would say like, okay, this is an actual submission attempt.
We have like stuff where like that is an entry and stuff that is an attempt.
Yeah.
Like Yuri was going for entries into leg locks, but at no point did he have a leg lock attempt.
Yes.
And it's
I think that's what I was seeing.
You can throw like kind of what we saw with Gabriel Souza versus Gianni Grippo. He throws it up with a flying triangle immediately. Like, yeah, it's an attempt at a flying triangle.
But it's not an attempt.
Oh, sorry, it's an entry to a flying triangle. I just fucked it up in my head.
Yeah.
But it is not a flying triangle attempt. Like, it's not something, and that match honestly is a bad example because I actually would have counted because Grippo had to defend it. We'll get into that match in a minute. But yeah, Yuri never really locked down a position. Wagner did just an outstanding job outstepping the legs from the top. Wagner, when you go for leg locks when he is on top, and he is almost always on top, he does a really, really good job of not ever overcommitting to your off balance because he avoids you trapping his outside leg. He does a really good job of immediately addressing the knee line when he's still standing as upright as he can be.
Yeah.
And then I just find that as soon as you start to push guys out or you start to get control of the leg or get where Wagner's not right over top of you, you can start knocking guys over and actually entering the legs. But Wagner almost never lets that happen.
Yeah.
He fights you from the top, so he has gravity, and he can basically press your leg off with his arms while he lifts and high steps out.
Well, you also have to, I mean, I think it stems from earlier in the sequences than that too, because before people are hitting any entries, Wagner's pressure is crazy. He's driving forward. Yeah. He's constantly driving forward. And in order to create the space to start hitting your setups, you have to deal with that constant forward pressure. And dealing with that constant forward pressure is puts you at a disadvantage for your setups for most of the time, right?
Yeah.
Is Wagner's good at not letting you do the thing where you're like, okay, I'm going to use your force into me to get it, right?
He never gives you the reprieve to like make space to get underneath him in the way you want to. Right. So you end up entering on him as you're kind of crushed in for space. Like you're reaching for a leg that you kind of have to reach for, especially on any inversion attempts. And we saw like, I think what I would call like a knee bar attempt from Yuri here. And Yuri's like, he doesn't have the space to fully roll over his shoulders. He doesn't have the hip extension to lift Wagner up. He's sort of like left kind of crushed in. Does a really good job of recovering the position. But
yeah. And so that was the bulk of the match. Was a lot of that was Yuri playing. There was a hand fighting for the first half of the match. The second half of the match was Yuri playing half guard. I think smart. I think he played a smart half guard game against Wagner, but I think that the largest part of his offense that he had available to him based on that game plan, that strategy, was leg locks, and Wagner was just doing an excellent job defending them. Wagner was in charge of the match the whole time, I thought.
And Wagner would throw up a nice Estima lock, or like a weird reverse toe hold Estima lock. I think there's not a toe fold. It's a modified Estima lock. And Wagner does it a couple of times. As soon as, like, if you ever put your foot in Wagner's chest, he will immediately do it really quickly. Yeah. He never really gets it, but he always prevents guys from posting on his hip and chest after he does it twice. Yeah. Like, it's something you repeatedly will see him do at the beginning of almost every match when you're on the bottom. Somebody will go to post to almost like do the old school De La Hiva, where they like the push sweep. What the fuck is that called?
Push sweep?
Where
sounds good to me.
You trap the leg, and then you push him over at the hip, and you'll try that once on Wagner, and he will immediately try to Estima lock you super hard and fast, and everyone goes, I'm not going to put my foot there again.
Yeah, but I wouldn't necessarily call those like submission attempts in terms of scoring. Maybe they were counted that way. We'll talk about this later, but it's getting pretty hard to figure out what people are scoring as what for these matches.
The card was a little... we'll talk about the end of it. The scoring here was a little difficult
tonight.
A lot of the matches were super close, so I think that's kind of part of it. But the rules for fight to win and the way decisions went for fight to win is, it's a lot of split decisions that were like difficult to see one way or the other, I think.
But Wagner, I don't know how it was scored, but Wagner wins this match, and just subjectively, I think Wagner wins this match.
We didn't talk about as much what Wagner was doing, but he was in charge of the match the entire time.
He was the one putting the pressure on. He was the one moving forward, and Yuri never really mounted any clear offense that made me say, uh-oh, Wagner's in trouble here, but Wagner was constantly on the edge of passing.
Yes.
And so that's, in my eyes, why Wagner should have won this match and did, but I'm not sure about scoring-wise.
Well, I think that I look when matches like this, I look at them sort of as a part of a whole. Like, okay, who do I think won that match based on like positional control, dominance, attempts? Like, yeah, and Wagner was the victor in the match. So it's cool to see him again continue to be successful at the higher weight classes. Again, Yuri's a bigger guy that's not an 85, probably closer to an 85er, but
I'm not sure,
but you know, cool to see Wagner be able to go up to 85 and then, you know, continue to find success.
Yeah.
Anything else on that one?
No.
Next match. Which one do you want to do next? I'm having a super hard time speaking. Sorry to everyone who has to listen to me bumble my 5 hours of sleep.
Let's just go in reverse order. Talk about Hibamar and Dante.
All right. So Manuel Ribamar defeats Dante Leon via very controversial split decision.
So controversial that I think Fight to Win made a post about it on their social media.
They do that from time to time, explaining like how they score stuff. And if you want to see how they score it,
it's there.
It's there.
They talk about.
While you talk, I'll pull it up if I have it screenshotted.
The important parts of it, I think, were that 1 point is awarded for a submission attempt, and then 5 points is awarded for a near submission, which is a very vague description of things. And I think that the vaguity is okay, right? Like MMA scoring is also very vague depending on judges.
Dude, decision scoring is always weird in every sport. Like it's look at ice skating. Like it's decisions are always weird in every sport.
Yeah.
I saw this one for Dante pretty clearly, and like we can talk about why.
Yeah.
But there was some weirdness. There was some controversy on it.
Yep.
Let's talk about the match.
Yeah. So it starts out with Dante bum rushing a takedown attempt that I don't think he really was gonna hit. But
I appreciate that, especially in the Fight to Win rules. Like I appreciate guys selling. We'll talk about selling out for stuff, but for takedown attempts. Selling out is something I do appreciate because in jiu-jitsu we tend to see a lot of like push. You're not going to defend. You're not going to defend. When a guy like Cyborg blast doubles you in the chest, he's if it was going to work, he's going to make it work. And I do appreciate when a guy like Dante like spears into Hibamar and like really looked like an actual attempt to get him down if Hibamar would allow it.
Yeah,
and I do appreciate that. It was two different pieces where they went off the mat.
Well, the first one I think that. It was nice aggression. I like to see it, but I don't think it was really going to happen.
The second one
was I count as a takedown, honestly.
Takedown
which happened a little bit later. So like that initial takedown exchange happened, and then nothing happened for quite a while. And
hand fighting.
Yeah, hand fighting.
There's one thing I want to see Dante do more, or not do more. One thing I would love to see Dante have more success with because I really like how he does it. It's that that really standard arm drag to the side, drop single leg.
Yeah.
He does it super quickly and super smoothly. I just wish he could have more success with it because I think that particular technique slots so well into a lot of the stuff that guys at the top level do in jiu-jitsu. And he does it so smoothly and so quickly. He just is always a little bit far away when he does it. And we saw it, I think, twice in this match. Yeah. He'd get the arm, he would pull, and Hibamar would immediately be pulling back, and Dante wouldn't be able to drop and grab the leg.
Yeah.
I wish he was like 6 inches closer when he did it because like technically it's so smooth. He just like guys pull out of it all the time, and I think that is a takedown we'll be seeing more and more because of how guys stand.
Yeah, it's very. I mean, if someone's standing very upright, you're able to get in. But also, I mean, part of it in jiu-jitsu is that people are not just upright. Well, their legs are extended as if they're upright, but they lean forward a lot, which actually makes that a little bit more challenging to do. So if someone's actually vertical, like upright in their chest, then that becomes a very clear option, and that might be why Dante's having a hard time getting in because people are leaning at the waist.
Yeah, and he has to cover that extra distance from the distance of your torso.
The difference between your arm and your legs, right? So if people are squatting a little bit more, but they're vertical in their chest, that's when that is open quite a bit.
It's partially why we see snap downs, like a collar tie snap down is so successful in jiu-jitsu is because people in jiu-jitsu
waiting for it
tend to have that leaned over stance, which is really effective for jiu-jitsu for like snatching heads, necks, and guillotines, but less effective for like offensive shot takedowns.
Yeah, I mean, well, that stance I think is also because guard's in play, right? If pulling guard wasn't a thing, we wouldn't see that stance that much, right? But if pulling guard is an option, I'm better off standing there than I am in sort of a traditional wrestling stance. Because in a traditional wrestling stance, when someone pulls guard, they're going to catch my leg and start entering De La Riva sweeps
immediately,
right
and you
away.
can't get away from
right?
it. Yeah, so
keeping my legs away is good for guard, and the meta is guard pulls. So
yeah, and also I think it's one of those things we don't talk about as much as like, well, jiu-jitsu has a shitty stance. It's like, well, no, it has a stance that's really, really important for the sports you're doing.
It's a shitty wrestling stance, but a jiu-jitsu stance nonetheless.
And there's a very, very valid because again, it's something we love to shit on as a community in general. It's like, oh, it's a terrible stance. Like, no, it's a great stance for the sport we're doing. Yeah. It is fun to like poke at it.
I don't know about great, but it is an acceptable or
I think it's a
intelligent stance.
It's an intelligent stance that has a purpose as opposed to just bad form.
Yes.
Like there's a reason why people are standing in that stance versus like a traditional wrestling stance that is great for a whole host of things that most people in jiu-jitsu have no ability to do and have no urge to do.
Yep.
So as a result, you tend to take this standard stance, which makes this one technique that I like that I want to see more from Dante, less successful.
Yes.
I still want to see it work because it looks dope. When he hits it, it looks dope, and he wraps you up really well. But
speaking of looking dope, that he hits that second takedown, which I think is just actually a very clean double, if I'm remembering correctly.
It's like a not like a pipe run single. It's like my wrestling terminology is failing me right now. It's essentially a double, but it's a double to the side where he's like trying to go for the push you forward with a single, essentially.
Well, either way, he. Actually, in my book, it was a takedown. I guess that they mentioned on the stream that the camera angle was maybe a little bit off, but it looked like he got him down. And then in an attempt to escape, Hibamar got off the mat, which that's what it looked like to me. But maybe that camera angle was just off and I didn't see it. I would have called it a takedown and reset them with Dante on top, but that's not what happened. It was an off the mat takedown, which I don't think counts as a takedown by their rules. And then they reset standing. And then some more hand fighting happened. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then they go to the ground.
Couple guillotine attempts. So I think Dante went for another takedown attempt. Hibamar kind of got a
Hibamar sprawls on it, goes to the neck, goes to a front headlock. I would consider the position you go into a front headlock, and then Dante, he sells out on the front headlock, he's going for a guillotine.
Sells out is weird. He tries to sell it as if he's actually getting.
Yeah, sorry, that's a better description for what happened. And
he
then
tries
Dante
to sell out.
Counters.
Damn it! Now you got me saying it.
It's confusing. It was an interesting week of semantics for this. So
he tries to sell this guillotine that's an arm and guillotine that was never, in my opinion, never going anywhere. But it's Hibamar, so he can hit guillotines from friggin' anywhere. Whatever.
He's got a good guillotine game. It's just Dante Leon also has a very, very good guillotine game. Yeah. And you saw the hand positioning and the shoulder positioning of where Hibamar is in the guillotine.
And I don't think he was going to get it.
Well, and also Dante's already pushing out. It's not in a finishable.
Yeah, it was not.
Way, and I'm Hibamar holds onto it to put that in the judge's head that it was a guillotine attempt, whereas I saw it as a front headlock.
And but then Dante backs out and then pulls into his own guillotine attempt that was basically the same exact
and that's where
thing.
The match sort of ends. It ends with, I think, the strongest attempt was that guillotine from Dante.
Yeah, but then, I guess, but there was still 4 minutes left in the match, so there was some other hand fighting, guard pull or two.
We're talking about different Dante guillotines, actually.
Yeah. There was a guard pull or two, and then Dante kind of has he begins an entry for a knee bar, and Hibamar runs out of it, and then
he inverts over, and then he sort of goes to take the back as Hibamar turns away, but Hibamar runs out of the position, and then they're back to the feet, and then the final guillotine.
The final thing is that Dante ends sort of on Hibamar's neck, but it doesn't. It was the closest in terms of finishability. It was the closest looking guillotine there was, but also there was 2 seconds left in the match, and it's possible that Hibamar got out before the end of the match. It's possible that he didn't. Unclear.
This one goes to Hibamar.
And then it goes to Hibamar, and it felt very mumuch like Dante had most of the aggression on the feet. He was the closest to getting takedowns, whether you counted them as takedowns or not. He had the closest attempts for sure, because Hibamar didn't have any attempts.
Right.
Hibamar had 1 guillotine attempt. Dante had 2 legitimate attempts, I think. Even if you don't count the second guillotine attempt,
I would give him two guillotine attempts. I think the final guillotine attempt was the best looking, but still really not finishable given the positioning of both guys.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that.
But I still I clearly think Dante should have won this.
Yeah, me too.
Hibamar wins a split decision here. It was a little weird. We're going to see Hibamar versus Tackett. Kind of the way that jiu-jitsu goes. It's frustrating a bit, but it was also a very low output match from both guys. You can't really be too upset. And again, what Seth says in the rules meetings when they used to run those was like, don't be too like if you don't win the decision, like do more in the match. Like like you gotta do more. So it's like I thought Dante should have won the match, but like you can't be too upset that he didn't, because it's like, well, if you're questioning and clear, you gotta like stuff's like fight to win your decisions, like do more in the match to make the refs like know that you deserve that.
Not even
decision.
that. That's classic like MMA boxing advice, right? Like that's like a rule of thumb that everyone hears over and over again when you're a fighter. If it goes to decision, you are not allowed to be mad about it.
Yeah.
Because you didn't do enough to win the match. Right. If it even hits decision, you didn't do enough. And I think that holds true. I think a lot of these end in decisions. I think this one in particular, neither one of them did anything that I was like, wow, that really should win them the match.
Right.
And overall,
we can look
looking
in
at
retrospect
it,
and like
these
pick these pieces out, but scoring it live, like you could have saw something very different. So I think like I was a little annoyed with this, but in hindsight, think about it like, I've watched it, I think 4 times at this point, and it's like it's a very, very close match. So there was definitely some controversy.
Neither of them did anything so impressive that I think that they should have won.
Yeah.
Right.
That's really what it is. So
that's where it lands.
I would love to see it again. I think both guys bring a lot to the table. I would love to see it. I would like to see both guys open up more and show us what they can do, because this match I don't think is a good representation of what the top guys in these divisions can do, and I was just a little frustrated with that.
Yeah. Hibamar plays that sort of. He kind of waits to get a guillotine game, anyways. Like this is kind of par for the course for him.
Yeah. Dante's not. It's kind of a very
Dante's
weird
very aggressive. But Dante
match.
was very aggressive here. It's just Hibamar was playing very defensively.
Yeah,
which he's known to do. But yeah, so it was a weird match.
Next match, we have Gabriel Souza defeating Gianni Grippo via decision. Lot to unpack. One of the only gi matches we're going to review. We're going to recap on this week's show. I made a joke before. I was like, you seen a featherweight gi match? This was that.
This is it,
But honestly, no bullshit, a pretty exciting
it was pretty exciting
match back and forth.
You
were annoyed at one point because Grippo enters the 50-50 from the top.
Robustly disappointed. Grippo, so Souza pulled guard early, and Grippo was playing on top for a little bit, and at a certain point, he sits on his butt, grabs with both hands, grabs the pant leg, grabs Souza's pant leg, opens his legs up, and shoves Souza's leg into 50-50. It was the most like blatant 50-50 entry ever.
Well,
like, from top. What
was really funny about it was like a lot of times in 50-50 entries, you see both guys like working, it ends in 50-50.
Yeah.
This is Grippo like, we've done this. Like we fought you like a couple of times now.
We're gonna go to 50-50. I'm just gonna put us there.
We're both featherweights. Let's stop pretending and just we're gonna end it. Give me the 50-50. Like in 50-50 now. We're there.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we can start doing jiu-jitsu.
It was just weird to see, especially from on top, because like I feel like the fight is always right. We talk about this a lot in 50-50 matches, or I'm sorry, in the lighter weight matches.
You can say it, Zach.
They're the same thing.
You giant heavyweight of a man that's never had to defend a De La Riva Berimbolo at blue belt.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, welcome to my life.
But also,
I'm
not sure Berimbolo was a thing when I was a blue belt. So
yeah. As a purple belt now, it's like it is the hotness.
Oh yeah.
Guys want to lift you up in with like every lapel possible and do a spinny backflip.
Get them Instagram clips, yo. So, but we've talked about this before. It's like it's a race to the bottom, right? And that's why you see these like double DQs and things like that in big matches, right?
If you pull, if you both double pull, and then no one comes up in 20 seconds or goes for a foot or lets go with a foot lock, they stand you up, they give you both a penalty. If it happens 3 or 4 times or 7 times, it's an eternity every time it happens. You both get enough penalties to disqualify. We see it.
It's happened.
It happens a couple times a year.
It's weird, but it happens, right?
It happens at the highest levels that we cover on the show a couple times a year where both guys get DQ'd. It is an integral part of the meta is like, I want to be on the bottom because from a progression point in the way that like jiu-jitsu scores, especially at the lighter weight classes, you want to start from the bottom. Now we're here, and you want to work to get your one sweep you're going to get a lot of times. in order to push them over, and it's much easier to sweep than pass, which is why it's worth less points. And so you want to start in the position that gives you the opportunity.
Well, especially because you end up in 50-50. It's not that it's always easier to sweep than pass. It's easier to sweep than pass from 50-50.
Yes.
And all of these matches, these double guard pulls end up in 50-50.
Or in some variation of like a very mirrored gripped position that shares a lot of the same technical problems that 50-50 has.
Sure. So it was weird to see someone be on top already. I mean, the seesaw points is not a factor here.
Yeah, we're fight to win. It's fight to win. Doing
so like
more,
you can do this, but it was just very awkward to see it happen. And then the 50-50 play, as far as 50-50 play goes, was actually pretty interesting, I thought. I
enjoyed it.
Like nice grip work happening.
Both guys, I appreciate this. Reminded me of like an AJP match. Because like both guys, it was a shorter match, a 7-minute match. Both guys were actively willing to work. Like there was not a ton of submission offense, but there was none of the like, I'm going to hold this one grip for 3.5 minutes, look at the ref, and then when he starts to give a stalling penalty, I'm going to try to stand up and do something, but not really. Like there was none of that. Like
both guys were clearly
technical jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, and both guys were clearly trying to progress into a place where they could attempt submissions, right? Like the movements and actions that they were taking were to put legs and ankles and knees in a position where they could apply a submission.
And I was honestly really, really happy with, like, from a technical perspective, I really enjoyed a lot of what Souza was doing. Like, there was one time where Souza goes from, it's not a worm guard, but it's like a magical lapel lasso position between his leg and...
Well, this was actually off of something else interesting, because it's rare to see at top level...
Let me talk about the thing before, and then you can go to the thing that you can explain better than I can.
Well, the thing that I'm talking about happens before the thing that you're talking about.
Okay, keep going.
So it's something that doesn't happen very often in professional jiu-jitsu at this level, but they ended up in reverse mount.
So reverse mount, if you've never seen it, how do we an audio explain reverse mount?
So imagine mount and then turn the other guy around.
So now you're looking at his feet.
It's reverse cowgirl.
Exactly. And then, but the thing is with it is like both guys can be in it at the same time.
Yeah.
And so when you get there, all is awkward. Lost, because typically it's like one of those weird positions where, much like 50-50, the first person to disengage from the position loses.
Yep.
But Souza does something super, super nifty here.
Yeah. And so Grippo Grippo was the first to do something, but he didn't really do much. He just kind of picked his hips up to start to try to think about something. Yeah. And Souza took that opportunity to sort of slide one of his knees in underneath and then got to a kind of a single leg X type position.
It was
like
he moved
his hips.
A single leg X position, but it wasn't with Souza in the front. It was with Souza from behind.
Yeah.
Almost like he was going to go for the knee bar that Herbert Santos goes for from 50-50.
Yeah.
Which is actually, this reverse mount is a position that sometimes Santos will throw that from. Or like a variation of this is how he will throw this from. So I thought he was going for knee bar. And then he turns from going like reverse 50-50 like knee bar into the standard single leg X, and it was like this nice little weird transition that is like Zach said, super uncommon to see people escape from reverse mount or like transition
with any technical. Like I feel like reverse mount, when you see it happen, it's just like a clusterfuck afterward, right? Like you get there, both people kind of look around and say, well, what the fuck is this? And then there's just weirdness that happens afterward.
Toe holds for no reason that you're not going to finish.
That's another thing.
There's knee bars you're not going to finish. There's double knee bars you're not going to finish. And there's toe holds. So I appreciate that both guys didn't do that. They both didn't play pretend. They're like, we're two of the top featherweights in the world, or light feather, or whatever weight class we cut to. Middleweight, lightweight, doesn't matter. We're in the lower weight classes. We're not going to bullshit with the feet because we both know we're world class. It's not going to happen. We're just going to do really good jiu-jitsu. And it was nice to see like Souza capitalize on this little instance of Grippo lifting his hips up.
It was very technical.
To make this transition out the side and then back to the center and then go in essentially what was like a single leg X. From the single leg X position, he is in a, again, 2021, I'm going to learn all the bullshit lapel stuff. I'm going to
heard that in 2020.
Yeah, but like 2020 was a cluster. 2020 was just survive. You know the scene in Tropic Thunder, now streaming on Netflix, which is just Robert Downey Jr. going survive. That was 2020. 2021, I'm going to learn the lapel names. And so he was in some magical lapel shit that was essentially a lasso guard. Yeah. But it was a lasso guard variation.
Well, it was. I think we've seen it before. I think...
I've seen it before. I've seen it a lot. Because I'm at the weight class that these guys fight at. Yes, I've seen it all the time. But we've
seen this even at higher weight classes, you know, middle, light, middle, heavy.
They don't do
it's like 50-50, but with the lapel fed through underneath a leg.
Correct, but under both legs.
Yeah,
and that was the difference here, is that Souza had the lapel under both legs on the single leg X, and then he opens his hips up, slides out, makes a really nice transition of his bottom or top leg over into almost like what is like an entry to an omoplata from there.
Yep.
And it was just this beautiful like sequence that there was not a lot of fluff in the middle of it. It was a very defined like black belt level movement where it's like my leg goes out, my leg goes in, my leg goes here.
Yep.
And there was no off balance from Grippo. It was just in free space.
Yep.
Souza was able to make 3 adjustments into this position, and it was just beautiful to watch.
And really nice climbing grip control,
Yes.
like sequential grip changes that are coordinated with the changes in his foot pressure and leg position. Like, it was a really interesting progression.
Yeah.
Very, very technical. Super cool to see from a position that you don't see very often. I don't think a lot of people practice dealing with reverse mount. I mean, maybe at that level you have enough time when you're training full time to work that position in every once in a while, but it's not something that like I've ever gone to.
It's something I've never
trained there.
It's something I show in my classes once a year.
I don't do
As
that.
like, well,
I don't think
like
I've ever showed it.
But it's one in the club. It's part of like my job as like a club instructor is like, hey, it's my job. You're gonna be here in college for 2 to 4 years, depending on how dumb you are. Is to show you like what's available in jiu-jitsu, so that if you want to keep training after you leave, I give you the framework to like, I've seen this before.
Sure.
Like, hey, that one time Maine taught that class where we talked about this was a position that existed. So that's one of my once a year like, hey, 10 minutes, this is a position that exists. Here's what your goals are. Here's what you got to worry about.
Sure.
And then that's it. But
that makes sense.
But about once a year, I teach this, like, this is reverse mount class. And I saw it. I was like, look at that, reverse mount.
Yeah.
The position that everyone forgets about.
But so that was the most interesting part of that match, I think. And then there were some more sort of like grip exchanges, some more 50-50.
Yeah. I think really like, it was a very good match. I thought Souza was definitely on the bottom more, but was definitely putting up the offense, was definitely forcing the positional changes.
The momentum, he was driving the momentum of the match most of the time.
Most of the off-balancing attempts, again, because he was on the bottom, were on Souza. I think Grippo never really got close to any significant pass. Good grip work from both sides, but again, when Souza wins the decision here, I thought, okay, that's a very reasonable decision. Not a whole lot of submission attempts, but Souza has a nice flying triangle like set up at the beginning, has a kind of an omoplata triangle set up towards the middle of the match. Overall, a really fun match. I'll probably want to go back and actually rewatch because like that, the gripping sequences here, I think are stuff that I need to start internalizing and learning about. I think both of these guys they tend to have very defined reasons for doing what they do. And so they're both guys that are really great to tape study because it's all stuff like, I think neither one is like a freak athlete, and they're all doing stuff with a purpose and a reason. And so they're both guys I tend to like look at tape study for, because it's not like, who's a good example? Like Leandro Lowe can just like make up something mid-match that works. Like in his addressing of like a lot of Keenan's lapel stuff is like, Leandro just figured it out halfway through the match and like, put me on the defensive here for this thing. Yeah. You know, it's like there's no, like Lowe has never worked that, but he can figure it out. These two guys are very much inside the meta of the featherweight, the lightweight, the light featherweight division, like those divisions there, understanding like why I should be gripping here and what the correct sequence of grips to do is.
Very intentional.
Yeah, very intentional. So I'm going to go back and watch this this week because I'm going to try to learn more lapel stuff slowly. But yeah, fun match, really technically entertaining match. On to the next match. I got the Pedro wrong last week. I said this was Pedro Mourinho. It was not Pedro Mourinho. It was Pedro Rocha, Gabriel Rocha's brother, most notably known for also the guillotine. So the dynamic of the match, honestly, I got correct in last week's preview, but wrong guy. So Pedro Rocha defeated Oliver Taza via decision. Two guillotine attempts, one guillotine attempt that ended up with a weird reset we'll talk about here in a second, and then a pretty solid chin pick, neck crank off to the side, and that was for the most part the offense that Pedro put up. Taza was trying to enter into the legs a bunch, and Rocha really did a good job either getting around or like staving off those attempts. I mean, when you fight Oliver Taza, that is what he is looking to do at all times. You know, he'll take a neck if he can, but really he wants to invert underneath you, turn you over, get a knee bar, or get a heel hook. And so Rocha does a really good job preventing that. There was definitely some weirdness in this match in one of the first initial guillotine attempts that Pj Rocha gets.
It was not unclear what was happening, but Souza was complaining about something.
Or saying something like, the broadcast couldn't figure it out, and the ref never said anything after, but it looked like Rocha had, this is what I think happened again. This could be entirely wrong. This is just what I think happened. And if you've listened to the show for any amount of time, not always correct. Pj Rocha had like a guillotine, and I think Pj Rocha was peeling Souza's fingers off. And he was trying to get a better grip on the neck, and so he was pulling on Souza's fingers, trying to get underneath, and Souza went like, hey man, he pointed to his fingers like, hey man, he's grabbing my fingers. You can't do that. And the ref looked and went, hey man, you're grabbing his fingers. You can't do that. So they reset, and they reset
but it was
back
like
into the guillotine.
A weird situation where they broke him up, and then Rocha thought that he had won or something like that for a split second. Like his response was very strange.
Really interesting. It was like, I'm not really, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, his response was really strange. Like, I think he might have thought that he got the tap or something like that, and then there was some discussion about what the hell was going on, and then they reset them and tried to reset them back in the exact same spot in the guillotine, but in the center of the mat.
The reset was interesting, but again, it's always weird resetting with a submission.
Right.
Like we've talked about this ad nauseum in the show over the years of like, do you reset in the submission? Do you not? And it's like, at the end of the day, it's like both guys are good with it, and the ref is like good with it. Like, you do whatever makes everyone happy, and if they're both willing to start back in that position again, good.
But again, anytime. So I think that this probably progressed in the exact same way that it would have had they not reset.
I don't think that as a guillotine connoisseur, I don't think that Pj Rocha was in a position available to finish the guillotine because he was on his side.
He was selling it.
Yeah, definitely.
Like he was.
When
but
that in the fight to win,
was not. Yeah. I mean, the only way that I could see that maybe it was going to happen, because he had the arm in,
and so maybe he could have transitioned to a darce.
Yeah, he might. That's what I was kind of thinking. He might have been able to change it into a darce.
But I don't really know Pj Rocha as a darce guy.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen it. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's not an option.
I mean, he's a high level black belt. Like, he knows how to darce people.
Yes.
They know how to do it. It just, he would have had to cover a lot of ground to do that. And I just think that Souza would have like disengaged enough, because Souza's not going to put his head there. And
he also kept kind of like rolling through with the guillotine in a way that told me that he wasn't really thinking about moving to the darce, but that's the only way that I would have seen him finish.
The hand position wasn't rolling at all. Then if you're going to have someone roll into a darce, you're going to stay in the same place. They're going to roll, and you're going to slot your hands through as they roll. Rocha was staying square and center with the chest and the shoulders for Souza, obviously looking for an arm and guillotine variation, or like a regular high elbow or just standard guillotine there. And so I think the reset was fine. Again, it was a little weird, but I didn't really have, honestly, an issue with the reset.
Yeah, I don't think it impacted the direction of the match as much as some of those resets in a submission might. But in the end, Souza did get out of that, and I thought that he was going to, even before they had reset.
Yeah, definitely.
There was another attempt that started with a guillotine and ended with Rocha inside control with the chin grip.
I love
and
this.
then leaning back.
I love this neck crank.
It's a legit thing. And
you know this neck crank.
Of course I know this neck crank. Yeah.
This is one that's really great, because if you do it, it's going to sound really weird when I say it. In my head, it was not as weird. Now it sounds weird. If you do it right, you hear their back and neck go as you finish it. And this is something that I'll only usually do to like big guys that don't think you can do it, because I'm a tiny, tiny man. And they'll let you kind of like, oh, I'll fight with my neck. And then you slide your chest and body right up next to the shoulders, and then you slide and you get to crank, much like Josh Barnett on Dean Lister. Which, for filling everyone in, Zach and I got into a 20-minute argument earlier this week about that match. If you haven't seen that match in Metamoris, I think two or three.
It's one of those.
Go back and watch it. First time Dean Lister got tapped with a very similar, not similar.
No, it was a Casey Katame.
It was a Casey Katame chest compression move. But again, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of these kind of moves because they're funny.
I don't do this to people because I'm too big and it's fucking mean, unless they're my same size or they have it coming.
That's reasonable.
But it was a legitimate attempt. I think that actually that was closer of an attempt than the guillotine was, and you could kind of see it in Taz's face that like he was uncomfortable. Like he wasn't ready to tap. It didn't
look finishable, but it looked uncomfortable as shit. One of those like
Taza had to respond.
I'm not going to tap to this, but I'm also not going to like chill here either.
Yeah.
I'm going to like actively look to defend.
Yep.
And then Rocha does the thing where, what I love to see as well with guys at the top level, you keep the sub in. Yeah, I'm not going to finish it, but I know it sucks. So I'm going to keep the sub in and keep like going through the motion of the sub, knowing it's not going to finish, but making you defend the entirety of the submission and not just trying to let it go and keep the position. I'm more than happy to have the scramble here. And I think in the fight to win rule set, that was something that we talked about before the show, is like, that is what you should be doing, actually.
Strategically,
like,
that's what you need to do.
You should be holding on to that sub strategically as long as possible.
Yeah. I think it actually makes, when we were saying this, I think it actually might make for bad jiu-jitsu overall, because the rules encourage you to hold. I mean, in this case, it's not. In this case, I think that was a fine thing to do and a smart thing to do.
But I think you knew he wasn't going to finish.
Yeah.
But normally what you do here is you hold, you turn, and then when they're about to escape, you'd let go and reset to the side control position versus like cause a scramble like Toss is able to like implement here. Because in Fight to Win, the submission is king. Going for submission attempts wins you matches. A submission attempt is worth more than something positional. So you are obligated to hold on to an attempt of a submission longer, even when it is positionally detrimental to you in the long
when
term.
you're never going to hit it, because the longer you hold on to something, the more it's going to click in the judges' heads that this is what I think in the post that Fight to Win made. It was
Seth made a post about talking about the
attempts versus near submissions, and so if you can hang on to it for 2 extra seconds, they might count it as a near submission, which is worth 5 points, 5 times more than a submission attempt, and so it's probably better in most cases, based on the rule set, to give up even mount if you're going to get your submission attempt, and then you're confident that you can defend the mount. Like, give up position no matter what if you can hold on to a submission attempt for an extra 2 seconds, because that might be 5 points and win you the match.
Yeah,
that's the way that the rules are.
It's an interesting dynamic, and it's something that we've seen a lot more recently. Is
people are playing that rule game.
Guys are holding on to subs that they're not going to get way longer than they used to 2 years ago.
And holding on to positions that are not even subs, that they're trying to make look like a sub.
Oh, you mean the 50-50 ankle locks?
Yeah, oh my God, they're killing me. But the 50-50 ankle locks are like...
toe holds in the last 10 seconds don't count.
But
I think Emil and I joke on the show, leg locks in the last 10 seconds of a match do not count.
But we see it with guillotines a lot too, because that's the kind of thing that you can just like make a vein pop in your head because you're squeezing so hard, and people go, "Oh, that looks like a real one."
Yeah.
You know, like there's things that there's quite a few submissions that you can apply.
This is in no way directed towards Pj Barch.
Oh yeah, no, I'm no longer talking about that. We're just talking about the rule set in general.
And rules, because I love talking about rules. But I'm saying like Pj Rocha did exactly what he should have done here, which is hold on to the guillotine as long as possible, because per like the win criteria for Fight to Win, like that is what you should be doing. So
that's the right strategic decision. And also, it didn't in this particular case. I think one of the things that we're talking about is when this might be encouraging jiu-jitsu in a way that is maybe not optimum, is in scenarios where you're going to give up crazy position in order to hold on to something a little bit longer to make it look like you have a sub close. In this particular case, Pedro, he gave up half guard over side control, which in this scenario there's no difference between those two positions here.
Especially with how Toss is going to play off of that. Is like he's going to give you almost the same stuff versus in either position there until you're going to have the same thing to respond off of.
No, it was the right thing for him to do. It was the smart thing for him to do, and it wasn't shady by any means.
And I realized it was like we were kind of getting off the lead there. I was like, let me make sure I'm glad we brought that back to like be like, hey, like this is what he should have been doing.
Yeah.
But this kind of led into a much larger discussion we had off air with how hard you weight submission attempts. And again, given, we had a lot of very, very close matches on this week's Fight to Win, and like a lot of matches that were, I saw them one way, judges saw them another way, I saw them the same way, judges, like there's a lot of
And again, it's not that I think that this is the case for you too, that these rules should be changed at all. It's just an interesting observation that I think people are playing to the rules of Fight to Win more. And I think 2 years ago, Fight to Win was a little bit more close to the chest about what their scoring was and what their rules were, and they were changing them kind of regularly.
And that's one thing I really do appreciate about Fight to Win is like what Seth will make rule changes like frequently. Like if something's getting gained or like they don't know where it's going, and they don't like, there's an issue with something, like he next event will like make a rule change. Like I appreciate that that's not this like long standing stonewalled process that's like, okay, we know this is an issue, but like we're just not going to change it because we're not going to change it. But it's like Seth's like, oh, that was an issue last week. Cool, you can't do that anymore. Yeah. Or like this is like I appreciate that because Seth at the end of the day is the guy that makes the decisions. He's also the guy that'll make the post and take the flack of like, hey, the decision was wrong. It's like, here are our scoring criteria. Yeah. Here's why it was scored this way. Sure. Like, and he won't hide behind like, oh, it's our rules. Like, hey, here is why it was done. Agree, don't agree, fight harder. So it's like, man, props to those guys.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I'm not critiquing what's happening at all. It's just more an observation about how interesting it is that a meta can evolve based on rules, and that people, it seems more and more like people are playing the fight to win game rather than just doing jiu-jitsu altogether. And I think that's normal, and it's going to happen no matter what the rule set is.
It happens in any rule set in ever. Like every single event that we have covered that has run one event and then run a second event, that second event has looked way different because guys have figured out a way to like work within that rule set more effectively. Yeah. It's like it is honestly the most interesting thing that I think one of the most interesting things we see regularly is like event to event how like athletes figure stuff out, because it's just like that the evolution of jiu-jitsu and like how to win. Yeah. So it was neat.
Gamesmanship's cool.
All right. So let's move on to the previews. I'll run through the rest of the card at the end of the show. I'm going to switch it up this week. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Moving on to our preview for Who's Number One, Craig Jones versus Ronaldo Jr. We also have Gordon Ryan versus Roberto Jimenez. We have Gabby Garcia versus Natalie. We have Gio Martinez versus Junior Ocasio. We have Andrew Wilsey versus Pj Barch. On the undercard, it's actually free on YouTube and Facebook, which is neato. Jessica Khan versus Danielle Kelly, which should be a really great match. And Jacob Couch versus Elder Cruz. Jacob Couch versus Elder Cruz should be a really fun match if you don't have Flow, which I would assume people listen to the show you probably do, but if you don't, watch them on YouTube and Facebook. So where do you want to start with the previews for these matches, Zach?
Start at the top. I mean, I think that's a good rule of thumb for these kinds of things.
Craig Jones versus Ronaldo Jr., 195-pound catch weight. I got Craig Jones via outside heel hook. What do you think?
I think that's a safe bet. I do like Ronaldo here. I
love Ronaldo. I love Ronaldo in the gi.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm not sure I like Ronaldo in no gi in this match, right?
Well, like, we saw him versus Wagner. And the Wagner match was, like, that was, I think, the most recent time we've seen him in no gi. Yep. And the Wagner match was it was a weird match. And that was when Wagner stepped in as a late replacement for Gordon Ryan because Gordon got COVID, and it was like this whole weird thing. And then it was a very close, very kind of like, it was a more close match than I would have liked to have Ronaldo's next opponent be Craig Jones. Yeah. That's really in my head, like, why I'm kind of making the Craig Jones pick. We've seen Wagner versus Craig a couple of times. First one was EBI. Wagner took it in overtime. Second one was Sug. Craig took it.
Yeah, Sug has weird rules, though.
The Craig match was weird for Wagner. Yeah. They're both EBI rules, but the Sug and EBI have weird rules where I don't think it's really representative of a lot of things. But I just feel like Ronaldo, Craig is going to, the dynamic of this match is Ronaldo's a really great passer. He's really great in the gi. He's got really good no-gi, and he's very athletic. He's very long, kind of a very similar build to Craig Jones. Mm-hmm. Very long, very lanky, uses those for his subs, the triangles, the arm bars. Like, he is a big finisher, and we see that a lot of long, lanky guys are. But I feel like he's going to stand too close to Craig Jones at one point, and Craig Jones is going to do what Craig Jones does, especially I'm guessing this is a 15-minute match. Yeah. It's your headline match. The Gordon Ryan match is the match underneath this is a 30-minute match, but Gordon typically has longer matches. Yeah. So I'm guessing this is at minimum a 10-minute match, if not a 15-minute match. And I just think that, like, Craig does a bunch of things, but like recently, Craig does like the thing Craig does, which is I'm going to invert on you. I'm going to flip you over. I'm going to grab your leg and I'm going to break your leg.
But we haven't seen Craig against someone as dynamic on top, especially while still on his feet, as Ronaldo Jr. is in a while. Yeah. Right. Craig's matches have been excellent competitors, but I don't think we've seen him against someone that is as mobile and I
also think the gamesmanship of Ronaldo here is very good. Like Ronaldo is not a dumb game planner. Like, he comes from that Atos camp, and those guys are all notoriously just amazing for, like, how they game plan for specific matches. They've fought guys like Craig before. They've fought Craig before. That Jim Andre will prepare Ronaldo very well for how to deal with Craig stylistically. And we saw, like, we've seen the Atos guys shut down very adept leg lockers before. We saw Rafael Guedes shut down Elizabeth Clay's game on a recent Who's Number One, or what's the women's card for Fight to Win?
It might have been Fight to Win.
One of those two. But, like, again, we saw somebody out from the Atos camp implement a very different game plan versus a very adept leg locker. We've seen it in the past. It wouldn't hugely surprise me to have Rolando have just particularly prepared to stay on the outside, get away from Craig's inversions, hands on the heels, hands on the feet, hands on the shins, hands on the chest, really keeping Craig away and, like, using the Kimura grip on the top to prevent Craig from being able to go over and invert. I just think that Rolando has a bunch of tools at his disposal here, but Craig is used to guys doing that. Is going to need one chance to get under.
I think Craig's the favorite, and I think I still pick Craig to win, but I don't think it's as obvious as most Craig Jones matches are for me on this one. And I'm going to be interested to see how he does in this match at this time, right? It's been a weird year, and Craig Jones has been active.
Yes.
Certainly. I just haven't seen him against someone that fights like Ronaldo does recently.
And also the game, like the fight IQ. Like, Ronaldo has very, very good fight IQ.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the pieces that a lot of folks in this matchup are overlooking is, like, how well Ronaldo can plan. And, like, he's super young still. He's been on the rise. He's been getting better and better and better. It's just, I look at the Wagner match, and it's kind of, I have more concerns about how he's going to be able to deal with Craig's game, which is, like, specifically designed about pulling you into his game. It's like, does he have the ability to be as active as he wants to be while not walking accidentally into Craig's game?
It's going to be an interesting thing to look for.
So I still am going to favor Craig via heel hook here, but and the more I look about it and kind of looked at the match, the more I was like, this actually isn't quite as easy as I thought for Jones. Like, Ronaldo brings a lot to the table.
I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be a great match.
Next month we have Gordon Ryan versus Roberto Jimenez, a heavyweight 30-minute match.
Yep. So this is happening because Nicky Ryan had to drop out for reasons.
Actually, I forgot. I don't know why. I thought I knew a couple of weeks ago.
I think he might have got hurt.
I think I'm guessing he did. That would make sense why this matchup happened. So Gordon Ryan, his older brother, steps in versus Roberto Jimenez.
It's a big jump for Jimenez. I mean, he's got some wins in the gi against excellent competitors.
He's got good no-gi wins, too.
He's got good no-gi wins, but I've been consistently less impressed with his no-gi than his gi. Personally.
Back and forth. I think Roberto's
a
guy to me that's very matchup dependent.
I was going to say very volatile in terms of his game, which maybe it ends up being matchup dependent, but like...
Yeah, matchup and volatile. Like, he is going to go and press a pace and push action on you and try to make you uncomfortable and, like, hit you with his cardio. Continue. Like, look at the Zaki Bahens match.
Yeah.
Look at, pick any sort of Roberto Jimenez match we've covered in the last year. He comes at you looking to prove a point, looking to put you on the defensive. He looks to throw you into close guard and get on your back and choke you. Like, that's where he wants to be. We've seen him have a couple of weird matches with leg locks, though. His match versus Craig Jones that was under 2 minutes. I think it was like 45 seconds where he got in the guard. Craig Jones inverted. Craig Jones took his leg off. We saw his match versus Felipe Andrew recently where he decided to go into leg locks with Felipe Andrew. Felipe Andrew got a toe hold. And we've seen him a couple of times go into leg lock battles with guys that are very adept leg lockers and not come out on top. That is what I'm concerned with here, given that Gordon Ryan, aside from Craig Jones, is one of the most adept leg lockers in the sport.
And also, I mean, Gordon Ryan's good at everything. But I think when I've seen him in matches and thought, holy shit, that was something fucking else, it's been when people come at him aggressively.
Yes.
Like, he is exceptional at jiu-jitsu, period. He is astounding in matchups where people try to take the action to him aggressively.
And that's something
that Roberto Jimenez does and wins matches off of, but you're doing it against a person that is probably the best in the world and is almost definitely the best in the world at dealing with that.
Yeah. I mean, that's why you see the matches for Gordon that haven't been as good, like the Buchecha match at ADCC. It was like Buchecha gave him fuck all to work with.
Gave him nothing.
And as a result, like, that was a very close, but those kind of, I think, Roberto, which is why we love Jimenez, is not a guy to give us that kind of match. No. But Gordon, on kind of what you said, it was like, he's the best in the world at who you want to fight him super hard and, like, come at him with everything you got. Like, the Deniz match recently was like Deniz made one little overcorrection in one position.
Yep.
And Gordon came out the back and got the heel hook. Pick any other Gordon match. You know, look at his match versus Tex Johnson with, like, the attritive passing of the close guard over and over again. Like, I'm honestly curious to see if Roberto actually just pulls Gordon. I think the best thing Roberto can do here probably is pull Gordon into close guard, double underhook, that beautiful back take sequence that Jimenez does.
Yeah.
And then, like, force Gordon to, like, pry him away. Because Jimenez is a guy, we've seen very few guys actually able to pry his face away from the double underhook close guard game. Like, can he get to Gordon's back? I mean, I don't think he can, and I don't think he can finish, but that is his pathway to victory here.
Probably. It'll be, I mean, I think most people, probably not Roberto,
which is why I like Roberto.
think Gordon Ryan's going to come out on top on this.
Yeah.
I would love to see Roberto Jimenez win this match, not because I have anything against Gordon Ryan, but because upsets are cool.
They're so cool.
But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, again, so how do you think it goes? How do you think it finishes?
Honestly, I think Gordon ends up taking the back and finishing him that way.
I kind of do too. I think that he's going to either pass and then let him up and then turtle, or he's going to, honestly, I could see this being very similar to the the Deniz match where he passes, gets on top, sustains mount for a while to, like, show that he can do it. And that, well, honestly, because, like, that's a big piece of that we talk about of Gordon's matches is, like, whatever DVD Gordon has coming out, like, he'll use that match to, like, showcase why you should buy his DVD, which is, like, but, like, he does it repeatedly, so it kind of, like, I'm curious to see if Gordon has been shooting additional footage or instructionals.
Shooting a mount DVD.
But really, like, that's a thing that he's done 4 or 5 times at this point, is, like, he will go into matches specifically pushing
a thing,
instructional footage, and then he does. So, again, a mount, I could see a back take, I could see a rear naked choke. That would not surprise me at all.
Yeah.
That's how I think it's going to go.
Yeah, that's probably it.
Next match, we have Gabby Garcia versus Natalie de Jesus. Interestingly enough, Natalie de Jesus has a win over Gabby Garcia in the gi. If she defeats her in no gi, she will be the only woman that has a victory over her in gi and no gi.
Fun fact.
Thanks, the guys at Flow, for that one. Listen to their preview show. I was like, what did they got for this? And then when they went off, I was like, that's a really interesting stat. I'm going to take that and talk to our listeners about that.
I think I'd take Gabby on this, though. Gabby's so hard to beat no-gi.
I agree. There's an interesting thing, though, because when the Jesus beat her, or got lost to her at Pans, I think.
Yep.
She was like, I know how to beat her. And then when they rematched, she implemented how to beat her. This match could look very, very similar to the match that we saw them in a year ago or so at Fight to Win. And DeJesus could come out on top. But Garcia has historically been so hard to beat in no-gi. That's the thing.
I think in gi, and so, like, that match, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but that match where DeJesus won in gi, she was able to use the gi to make that happen.
Yes,
right? Like,
very much so.
It's Gabby Garcia is just such an athletic woman that you need to have some tool at your disposal to sort of negate some of that athleticism in order to come out on top. And you have far less tools available to you in no-gi to make that happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's why she's much more difficult to beat no-gi than gi. Is that athleticism factor, and
you can't get her off you. You cannot create the space that you need to start working with Gabby Garcia in no-gi. Like, in gi, you have something to pull against and to frame against and to utilize as a space creation device. Yeah. In no-gi,
and just
Garcia is the best in the world at, like, I'm going to impose my will, utilize my size, get on top, flatten you out, and stop you from being able to put up
anything.
Again, I'm super excited for this one. This one, I'm going to lean Garcia. Watching DeJesus take this one would not surprise me in the slightest. Like, this is one there. I'm picking
It wouldn't be
Garcia.
a huge upset in my mind, but...
I wouldn't even be surprised. I'm saying I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, okay.
So you said you'd be a little surprised?
I'd be a little surprised, but I wouldn't say I didn't believe that could happen. I think that it can happen. I most certainly think that it can happen. I'd still be a little surprised because just Gabby's history and Nogi, but...
I think she's like 60-something, 70-something matches in a row Nogi victory.
Yeah. Hard to pick against that.
It is very hard to pick against that, but
if someone's going to do it, it's DeJesus.
That's what I'm saying. If somebody is going to do it, it's going to be Natalie DeJesus. So that's why I'm very, very excited for this matchup because DeJesus has the most recent win over Garcia, and so I think seeing that Nogi and DeJesus has been improving her game. She's dealt with Garcia. She knows what to deal with. I assume that Garcia is going to go into this game with the same thing that Garcia has utilized for the last couple of years. Like DeJesus goes into this match knowing exactly what Gabby Garcia is going to do because she has felt Gabby Garcia do it, and Gabby Garcia has not significantly changed how she wants to go into a match in the last few years, at least.
No, she hasn't needed to.
And I think that Jesus will have made changes, and that's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Next match, anything else on that?
Nope.
We got Gio Martinez taking on Gianni Ocasio. Gio's going to be a little bit of a bigger guy here, but I'm actually really amped about this matchup. Gio took a really close match over Paulo Miao at a recent Who's Number One. These guys are fighting for one of the top ranks at, I think, 66.
Junior's been looking real good lately. Gio's a great test for him. I'm excited about it. I think it's a really nice matchup.
Guys are gonna go for the leg locks. Like we're gonna see, but interestingly enough, we have seen Martinez implement way more passing recently. You know, that's what won his match versus Paulo was like the passing attempts and that's where he was strong. And so Ocasio, I think, is gonna pull here. I think is gonna go for the legs, and I'm curious to see if he's gonna be able to get away or he's gonna be able to deal with Ocasio's entries and pass off of them, because that's something we've seen him consistently be able to do very, very well, is strip the leg grips, free the knee line. But Ocasio finishes super weird. Ocasio doesn't necessarily need your knee line to leg lock you because he uses a lot of like underhook grips with his leg and hip grips and Ocasio has a weird leg lock game, and him and Cummings were the only guys that we really see play that game. And a little bit with Lachlan, but like Ocasio is in his own league with the way that he leg locks, and I'm very curious to see how Martinez will deal with it. I think Martinez is the bigger guy here, when Martinez does tend to use his size and range very, very effectively. And I think the most parallel we have is the match with Kennedy. Did Gio fight Kennedy?
I don't know.
I want to say he did. I know we just saw recently Juni went up in weight to fight Kennedy Masayal, Cabrinha Jr. And yeah, he did. He just lost via decision at Who's Number One. Akana Duarte versus they don't list it off. Oh yeah, by the way, props to Flow. They now have a BJJ Heroes page for all the fighters that have all their wins and losses, and actually
links to the video, which is
incredible. I have talked about this on the show since 2017. This is supposed to be in news, but I forgot about it. You're getting it now. Since 2017, I have talked about this on the show. I am so happy to actually see it. When I
first got my Flow account, I was blown away that it didn't exist. And I'm very, very happy it does. Because it's the biggest... It was the most important change that they could have possibly made.
I'm so excited. I want them to expand the columns a little bit so that stuff's not cut off.
Fine, whatever.
But other than that,
visuals...
So excited.
The fact that they put together the database, which I think was probably holding them back, is just...
We tried to do it. It's an astronomical undertaking to do that.
It's very difficult.
Done now, and it's like, holy shit, it's amazing. Like, it's going to make tape study so much easier. I'm so excited. I am giddy for it.
It's the resource that I've been wanting since 2010. You know, it's an incredible...
It's what I wanted BJJ Heroes to have.
And
now, essentially, we kind of have it
for things that are available on Flow.
Yeah, but I love too. They have stuff listed that's not on Flow.
Yeah, like, it's nice that they have the non-Flow things.
You can't watch the matches there, but it shows you what it was and where it was too.
Yep.
And there's still some issues here and there. There's a lot of stuff for the people that aren't like in the top 10 rankings right now in all the divisions that are just like listed as other and this. Like it's obviously a work in progress.
Yeah,
but
fine.
They have it for everyone I looked at. I spent some time coursing through like everyone they have listed currently that's in the top 10s. Has information and has like matchups listed, so it's for shit like this.
Yeah.
Where it's like, did he fight him? Click, click. He did fight him.
So much
they both have losses to Maciel recently, and I think they're both their most recent matches. I'm very, very curious to see.
Yeah, I think I like Junie for this one. I think Junie's been doing real well lately. I've really liked his progression. I think that he's not bigger, but I think he might have an athleticism advantage against Gio at this point.
Gio's getting a little older.
Yeah. Junie's still very young. There's a big age gap there. I'm excited about it.
Black belt, hungry for it.
Yeah.
Like I think Junie has a lot to prove here,
and he's technically very sound and getting better every match.
He's only getting better. Like we watched him
really active.
We've been covering Ocasio since he was a purple belt when he won the Kasai Pro qualifier, and it was like, who's this purple belt that submitted like 4 black belts to win this like black belt invitational qual? Like who is this dude?
Yeah.
And then he got an EBI, and it's like we have watched his game just continue to skyrocket and improve. You know, I'm very hot on Ocasio still, and I think that potentially he could upset Martinez here, and so
I think so.
Yeah, should be a fun match. Really excited for the rankings perspective for this one. Next match we have Andrew Wilsey versus Pj Barch. Super interesting matchup because we have two kind of power pressure heavy wrestlers that can also play guard, that can also footlock, that can also attack arms and legs. Like these are two guys, kind of much like the Dante versus Dante Leon versus Gary Tonin match, where it's like these are two guys that are really dangerous everywhere.
Yeah.
I think Wilsey is much more the guard player than Barch here, and I'm curious to see how much trouble we're going to see him give Barch in the guard. That's where I'm guessing this match is going to take place, but we also saw some great top positional work in his match versus John Combs. I'm super. This is again. We've not seen a ton from Barch recently because he's coming off that big knee injury after West Coast Trials 2019.
He did have a match kind of recently. He looked pretty good, and if I remember correctly,
I mean, he looked good. We covered him. I think 2 matches recently.
I might have covered that match with you.
And he fought.
Ethan Krallinson, and I remember that he lost that match, but looked really good in the process. Right? He was in good position. It was a close match, ended in overtime.
Yeah, overtime is submission underground. So it was a very short 5-minute EBI, submission only match, and then an overtime match.
Yeah.
That Krallinson defeats him in overtime. I think it was ride time, I think is what it was. But looked really good in the match. So Wilsey's been on a tear recently. He's been getting a lot of big profile matches and showing up for him.
Yeah.
So I don't know
who to pick on this
really
one.
Know here. I kind of want to
pick
Wilsey just because he's on the hot streak. He's been looking really, really good in Nogi. And when it's one of those matches where I have a lot of data on a guy recently versus a guy we haven't covered a ton recently,
and his last 2 matches have been. He is off an injury, and his last 2 matches have been losses.
Yeah.
So I'm
going to lean Wilsey here. Again, victory for Barch here wouldn't surprise me. A sub victory for Wilsey would surprise me, but I could see Wilsey getting a decision here. Super young, super athletic, not coming off injury.
Yeah. Looks good.
So pre-prelims, we have Jessica Khan versus Danielle Kelly. Again, a really, really fun matchup. Jessica Khan, new ALJ black belt. Danielle Kelly, Atos black belt?
I think so.
Which is really funny because those two teams were linked until very, very recently. So I'm guessing that they've trained together.
Yeah, probably. But Danielle Kelly's been looking really good lately. Couple strong wins, and Khan's still very new, but has looked great forever.
Yep. Look at Khan's match. Again, she lost the match, but look at her match versus Maisa Bastos.
Yeah, I mean, losing to Maisa Bastos this early into black belt is not necessarily something that's a detriment to her.
Yeah.
I think it's an exciting matchup. It's a good test for Jessica Khan, and Danielle Kelly's on the rise. She's been looking really good in Fight to Win. I don't think we've seen her outside of Fight to Win.
I think we have, and it's killing me because I can't.
Oh, really?
I can't think of it. Where? But I know I've been really impressed with her overall, and Khan we've been following for years now, have been super impressed. But this is a fun match. This is like a really dope match for a free match on YouTube and Facebook.
It's a great.
Definitely watch this match. Can't wait to talk about this next week. Next match, we have Jacob Couch versus Elder Cruz, another fun match. Watch Jacob Couch's match versus Cody Steele at Kasai Pro 7 if you're curious to see what Couch looks like. Elder Cruz been on Fight to Win a bunch. Should be a really fun card. Very, very excited for it. Anything else to add for who's number one?
Nope.
All right, let's move on to our preview for Fight to Win 165. This is the all-women's card. I love that doing this once a month, showcasing the female talent. That's dope. We have a bunch of matches for this that I can't find right now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the two that we do have. Maria Miliasic versus Elizabeth Clay in the gi. Listened to an interview with Elizabeth Clay recently on... what podcast was it? Really good interview. Really, it was with AJ Klerman, whatever AJ Klerman's podcast is. Talks about training in Alaska, growing up, and Elizabeth Clay. It was very funny in this interview. Talked about, she goes, everyone sees me as leg locker, gi, no gi player. It's most of my really good stuff is in the gi. I have multiple world championships at juvenile and adult and in purple belt and brown belt in the gi. A lot of my pans wins are gi wins.
Yeah.
And everyone thinks of me as this no, because you got ADCC, you got the trials ADCC, the big one.
Yeah.
And that's the black belt one. So super.
Yeah, and I mean, most of her matches, her like really exciting matches and her big wins recently have been no-gi recently.
Yes.
So that's, I mean, that makes her breakthrough was no-gi. So
we've seen her in gi, I think in Subversive. She was on a gi. She was on a team, I think with Cody Steele and William Tackett.
Yeah,
actually at Subversive.
Yep.
Looked good. So I think that's the only time we've seen her in the gi. Again, plays a similar game. Very curious to see how she lines up against Maria Miliasic.
She was one of those that she was competing no-gi at when she was still technically a brown belt,
purple belt.
Well, but recently, she's a recent black
Very
belt,
recent
right?
black belt. I think November of 2020.
Okay, yeah, and so some of those matches where people were when she was really having a breakout, she was still a brown belt.
She was still 16.
Yeah, right.
She was still I think she's 20 now.
Yeah.
So it's new black belt, 20, the world. This is one of her first black belt matches. And you're fighting Maria Miliasic.
Yeah, right.
Props to you. Very curious to see. Again, I unfortunately can't recall a lot of Clay's matches in no-gi. I'm so much more familiar with her gi. This is going to give me an opportunity to actually what I said.
Can't recall her gi matches.
Correct. Yeah, my bad.
And it's hard to pick a winner for this because we know Elizabeth Clay is so skilled in no-gi, and I guaranteed that skill transfers to gi.
Oh yeah.
But against Maria in the gi, it's hard to say. I think the favorite has to be Maria right now, but we'll see. We'll see how Elizabeth Clay looks in the gi once we get a little bit more information on her, I think.
If you got 30 minutes, listen to the interview on AJ Klingerman's podcast. I can't for the life of me remember what it is. It's on my other phone.
Yeah.
But yeah, find it, listen to it. It's new. It's really cool. And Clay talks about kind of her career coming up and a lot of her training and thoughts on gi versus no gi. And it's honestly a very, very insightful interview. Cool. It's cool to hear actually that side from Clay because we don't see as much from Clay, and I'm excited to see where she goes.
Yeah.
Moving into black belt.
Be interesting. Check it out.
It's exciting. We also have Luisa Montero versus Jessica Flowers in the gi, a classic rematch.
Yep.
Again, I'm gonna push Flowers here. I think every time we see this match, I'm like I don't know how to pick it.
Yeah, I don't know how to pick it. Yeah, I think Flowers has been more active recently. Luisa's so dominant when she's on, though.
When she looked really, really good at Third Coast Grappling with women.
Great at Third Coast, and she also looked great. I think maybe I might be misremembering.
On the last women's Fight to Win, I think she was on it as well.
She was in her run at Pans this year was really good too, which wasn't that long ago. Luisa looked really good there, but we don't see her in these events as much, right?
She had a really, really good match. Might have been versus Baby Vieira last year in the gi. Actually, it was before Corona because I was on a treadmill at the gym and I watched it.
Yeah,
I was on the elliptical at the gym and I watched it.
Yeah,
on a Friday night one night, and I remember being just a barn burner match.
Yeah, she's always looks really solid.
I kind of want to pick Montero now.
I was gonna lean in Montero.
Well, it's I've picked.
She's had some strong runs in the gi recently.
The Pans run,
the Pans run was solid.
Is I think
if I'm remembering
what pushes
correctly,
me over right now is I just think that I think you're right. The Pans run, I'm gonna pick her here. Looked really, really good. Excited. I'm super upset I can't find the rest of them. I looked, and as soon as we finish the recording, I know I'm gonna find the rest of the matchups. But yeah, should be a super fun card. Again, I'm so happy that Fight to Win is showcasing more women's talent. Oh, her profile's up. Awesome. Who did she face last? Yeah, Pans was her last thing.
Pans was her last thing.
She beat Kendall Riesling and Natalie Hibamar.
Yeah.
Kendall by a toe hold, and then points for Natalie at 2020 lightweight, and then the absolute division she beat Riesling. Yeah, that's...
She looked good. She looked good at Pans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did I mess up? Has she not fought Flowers before?
Yeah, she has right there.
Where?
Win versus Flowers.
Oh, yeah. Other Europeans 2019, absolute division. Yeah, that's their different divisions. So,
yeah.
With 2 wins over Miliasic. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I go with Montero based on her recent performance.
And previous wins over...
Yeah, it was a couple years ago.
Yeah,
Jessica Flowers is still pretty young.
We were talking about heel hooks in the gi maybe before the thing. She also that was the match versus Maggie Grandotti at Substars. It was a gi match. There was heel hooks in the gi, and Zach and I were both very happy about heel hooks in the gi. So should be a great card. Super excited for it. Again, I don't have the rest of the matches up, but very, very excited for it. Any other pieces of information there?
Nope.
All right, so end of the Fight to Win results. We have Travis Clark defeating Chad Fields via split decision to retain the title. We have Alan Shabaro defeating Ed Weishout via decision. We have Diego Santana defeating BJ Nelson via decision. We have Henrique Rosa defeating Justin Onaria via decision. We have Michael Torres defeating Angel Torres via heel hook. We have Fabricio Baratoni defeating Gabriel Rocha via split decision. That was fight of the night for the black belts. We have Pedro Villas defeating Rodrigo Lopez via choke. That was submission of the night for the black belts. We have Robbie Malenfort defeating Vinicius Carvalho Garcia via decision. We have Lorenz Marzano defeating Abug Nindai via decision. We have Mike Anderson defeating Wally Thomas via choke. We have Mike Broderick defeating Stefan Hall via head and arm choke. We have Jusno Kim defeating Jason Gavita via choke. And we have Andre Gomez Race defeating George Perez via bicep slicer. On the brown belt results, we have Zach Cothren defeating Mark Francescuti via choke to become the Fight to Win Masters champion, and that was also submission of the night for the brown belts. Zach, as far as outro this week, what you got going on? Anything fun?
No jiu-jitsu this week because Spencer's out for the week, so I'm just gonna relax.
What's he doing?
That's nothing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna do the same thing.
Yeah.
Just living
just chilling.
My house. It's snowing in Baltimore again.
Yeah, that's been a pain in the ass. Not because I can't drive in the snow. I grew up in Cleveland, so it's like fine driving, but everyone else in this damn state doesn't know how to drive in the snow, and so it's brutal.
It's crazy.
Like, I am actually way more nervous to drive in 2 inches of snow in Baltimore than I am in 2 feet of snow in Cleveland.
Yep.
They don't take care of it here as well.
The snow maintenance in Baltimore is atrocious.
That's better than it is in Philly.
Splitting hairs here.
Yeah, no.
But it's bad. Also, people run their tires bald here, which makes it really hard to stop. And living up north for many, many years, you learn not to do that or you die.
Well, you had snow tires that you put on in the winter.
If you were not broke.
My wife had snow tires that she put on in the winter. I ran my tires bald in Cleveland,
too. I was a broke college kid. I was like... Too. I also drove a Jeep, so that helped as well. Yeah. Actually, I drove a Camry for a while with no snow tires. That was a 2-wheel drive car that you learn how to drive good. That's what I learned how to drive in.
I drove a rear-wheel drive 1997 Saturn with a busted window in the back, so my back seat would just fill with a foot of snow every winter, and I would just leave it there because it wouldn't melt, because it would stay frozen all winter, and then I would just shovel it out at the end of the year. God, I couldn't afford to fix the window.
How did we become upstanding members of society?
I wouldn't say upstanding.
With like degrees and like generally respected and like crazy
times. Speak for yourself.
So the snow's been fun.
Yeah.
Looking forward to getting vaccinated and then getting back into training jiu-jitsu and doing the fun stuff.
Yes.
I got nothing else, Zach. Anything else?
That's all I got.
As always, in the show, I'm your host, Mange. I'm the co-host,
Zach.
And we are the Grappling Room to see on the mats. Whenever that is, stay safe. If you like the show, please consider sharing it on Facebook with the folks at your gym. It's the best way that we grow the show, and we really appreciate it. You can reach out to us on email.
We also have Instagram. We have Facebook. We have Twitter. We have Google+.
Until that shuts down.
We have a website.
If you have an event you would like to have us cover, please let us know. If you have a name, like most people do, and you'd like to have us stop butchering it,
let us know.
Reach out to us. The show is also available on YouTube, Spotify, in addition to iTunes and every other podcast service. We very much appreciate your time, and thank you.